Okay, so my name is Casey Reyes. I'm in the mechanical engineering department, and my professor is Dr. Vis Menhaven. Today, we're going to be talking about image processing techniques to analyze adiabatic shear bands in aluminum 7075 T6, and we'll be utilizing MATLAB with that. So, a little background: everything we know of today consists of a certain material, that be metals, ceramics, plastics, composites, etc. And in order to design complex systems, we have to understand adequate behavior. So this could be mechanical behavior, this could be thermal behavior, this could be anything and the like. And one of those behaviors that we do not fully understand currently is adiabatic shear bands. And there's a lot of research going into this right now. And on this next slide, we're going to see that adiabatic shear bands are a mechanism of failure that occur when in metals and other materials that are deformed at a very high rate. So this could be a bullet that hits a surface and crushes very, very fast. This could be machining at a very high speed. As you can see here on the bottom, there is actually a tool and a workpiece here that's getting cut at a very high speed. And these serrations and these lines right here, that is what an adiabatic shear band is. And it's at a high temperature, high stress zone. And they call that the primary shear zone. And the big slabs here are also called secondary shear zones. So moving on to what the actual research question is and what I'm trying to achieve. So can we take images of materials that have already experienced high strain rates? So in this instance, it's going to be machine chips of 7075 T6. And can we infer strain rate distributions with no information of how it's deformed? Kind of like if a detective was to come on a scene and they needed to know what process occurred in order to get to where it was then. I'm kind of doing that same thing. I'm backtracking. And another picture down here, you can kind of see as we increase the speed that we're cutting the material, we can start to see these serrations occur and these adiabatic shear bands form. So a little overview of what we're going to talk about today is the digital image correlation method. So that's the current method we use right now to infer velocity fields and strain rates. Sample procurement process, image processing tool that we created, and then the results and applications for this tool. So digital image correlation is simply taking multiple images and interpolating the pixel position. And then from there, we can determine the velocity field as well as the strain rate and strain. So this is important because it provides a very high fidelity velocity field, so very accurate velocity field. However, it requires multiple high-speed cameras, which can be very expensive, as well as calibrating this for every test, which can also be pretty expensive and time labor extensive. So moving on, we're going to talk about how we procure our samples of the chips that we machine. So most of the metals go through the same similar process. We set up the tool and we cut the piece or the chip out with a very sharp tool. And then from there, we put it in an epoxy mold. And then after that's cured, we grind it down to a surface finish of 1 micron and then etch it to obtain a microstructure of the chip. And actually got to do this last semester. I got to go through this whole process. It's very fun. And then from there, after we're done procuring all the sample, we go upstairs and we put it under the optical microscope at 100 times magnification, a very high resolution as well. So moving on to the image processing tool. So this tool is pretty much the same as DIC, but kind of flipped in reverse. So we start with a post image or image that's already been deformed and the serrations are there. And then we apply our tool to it. And then from there, it can infer a velocity field. And then from there, we can figure out strain rates and strains just like DIC. And we're currently modeling the 7075 T6 using a physics-based model from Chapeau's paper. And this is a flowchart of how the tool actually works. So first we start with the preparation of the samples and image acquisition. So that's what I just talked about. And then from there, we have our sample image. And we can define the parameters of cut afterwards. And this can be the adiabatic shear band width, the velocity. This is kind of what drives our optimization to get an accurate image. So from there, we plot an approximate shear band curve. And I'll kind of show that in a picture later. We define the physics-based model, and this is simply just an equation that we apply to each pixel relative to this curve. And then from there, we go through our qualitative check, and if it's a no, this doesn't pass, we go back and redefine our parameters. This is the optimization part. And then if we say yes, it passes, then we're done. That's the end. So a little bit of background on parent material before we move forward is that this is the 7075 T6 before we've machined it, before anything's happened to it, right from the manufacturer. And we can see equax grains. And basically that means that the grains are equal relatively in size, and there's not a lot of deformation that's occurred here. And then also the small black inclusions here are pretty irrelevant. They're mainly just from the manufacturer's shop, and they simply don't pose any sort of interest in this. Just a note. So what are our visual criteria for acceptable images? Currently, it's all qualitative. We're essentially looking at the picture. We're seeing if the free surface has been reconnected. Are the grains showing more equiax structure? And is the cutting surface aligned as well? And I'll show all of these three criteria in the next pictures. But mainly we wanted to use these simple criteria at first to see the feasibility of the tool. We didn't want to go into any quantitative just yet. So what are the results that we have here? So you can see on the left here, we have the image of a chip that has been machined. And on the right, we can see what the tool has done to that image. And you can see that the slab, so this initial slab right here, and then the slab to the right, that's what's being deformed in this picture. We're essentially wanting to take this surface right here and move it down and kind of reconnect it with this. And that's what this orange line is. That's the free surface. And then another thing here is the adiabatic shear band. You can see it right here better. It occurs every time there's this serration and dips down. And then we also have the cutting surface here on the bottom. That was the only criteria that we weren't able to meet just yet. And this is mainly due to the tool not being optimized for this just yet. And essentially it kind of just pulls it too far down and it doesn't line up with this black line here. So from those results, we can show that the tool shows promise, but we need to determine some quantitative measures for accuracy. And the main method we're currently looking at is taking that velocity field that we determine and then comparing that with the traditional digital image correlation techniques we have currently. Another visual thing that we saw was the equiax grains are shown in the secondary zone, but it's very hard to determine in the primary zones because they're small width and we don't have enough resolution for that. Another thing that we were thinking of is doing a machine learning model to be tested on comparison with this model as well. So this is a physics-based model. A machine learning model is taking images in a database and comparing them with what we have. And that would take some time to set up. So the application for the field. Right now, having a tool that can process images with only a post image would streamline the research process. So usually we take two images or two or more, and we take these images to get useful data from the DIC method. But in this method, we'd only have to use the post image. And we can use that either to check our current DIC methods. We can also use it to confirm our FEA models that we also have, which is finite element modeling. And then we also could use these to basically take the image of multiple pictures and set up a database for machine learning, like we said earlier. Another thing too is that any research that goes into this adiabatic shear band increases our understanding of high strain rate behavior in materials, which can help us understand how to better machine parts. We can also create better bulletproof vests, missiles, etc. There's a lot of applications this can go into, as materials can be used for a variety of industries. Okay, and then also a thank you to my research mentor, Vis Menhaven. He's a great mentor, helped a lot with what we were doing, and then Homar and Pavan as well, and then as well as with the McNair staff. And then these are my references that I use for this, and that's about it. Thank you very much. For sure. So this tool could be used as an initial check for DIC methods, but it also could be used if optimized correctly. Like right now, we can't really use this tool to make decisions because it's really in its preliminary phase. The results we get from this are mainly not going to be very accurate to what we get from DIC currently. So decisions made from this is just not gonna cut it, at least right now. For sure. Using MATLAB, I'm not too much of a programmer myself, but this was kind of the project my mentor gave to me, and I kind of just ran with it. So a lot of this was really a trial and error. I spent like, 10 hours one night just, I stayed up all night just trying to figure out why the code isn't working and how we can improve it. A lot of it was also going or getting with my mentor, showing him the results I had now, and then him giving me more ideas on what we can improve to it, and then kind of expanding from there. But yeah, the main issue is for me was just learning this new tool and learning how to use it.